All right. Has everyone received the 1AC?
Yeah, just give me 1 second to open it up. Sorry about
Yep.
that.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm good whenever you are.
Okay.
Yep, all good.
Okay. Reagan's declaration of the war on drugs was a declaration against people of color, while new criminal laws created harsh penalties for possession. Reagan's racist rhetoric ostracized drug users and reassured white America in the aftermath of the counterculture movement. That's not a to declare war on drugs, military terms, battle surrendered. This was a radical strategy, demonized drug users, Bush included continued a prosecution of radical force process strategies, a couple of threat movement, embrace for criminal prosecution, being drug problem through war, applies the problem can be attacked with law enforcement, a cultural change was underway, reaction to counterculture of the 60s, drug attempts to public center against the drug use rhetoric of war taps, and recourse enemy for Reagan was used to construct POCs, the enemy, the group to white Americans, viewed as sources of a crime against rhetoric, happened to the cultural attitudes, but POC and links to drug use to portray minorities as responsible, punitive law enforcement provided the weapons, and this was effective for POC. The war on drugs has always been racially coded. Lawmakers deliberately targeted African Americans and Hispanic communities. That's not a truth. The Bush intended to criminalize behaviors of African American Hispanic communities to encourage trying to drug values. The modern community, the war was moral education that inflicted damage on African Americans, Hispanics for the benefit of non-disadvantaged Americans. The drug war achieved political, not policy objectives. But Reagan wanted to reap the benefits of a period of drugs. The drug war was a way to use Black Americans to electoral lens. Broadly, the war has formed the basis for European conquest of the global South and the maintenance of white supremacy. That's not a truth. The drug trade was organized. Liberal trafficking, but in European conquest of white supremacy drugs, weakened culture and the ability to resist white intrusions. The federal opium to produce out of laws is for lead for heroin to finance some Afghanistan cocaine to for contrast while the government was trumpeting war on drugs with deeply followed drug trade community was targeted by draconian prosecution policy and exploitation of misery to advance the political ends. Drug related the sentencing form of the bedrock of contemporary mass incarceration. 50% of people in federal prisons with their drug related crimes. That's 2017 as well. Begin rest of drug violations increased to 27% to 1 billion number of sentences increased to 26,000 increased to 550% by 2014 versus 96,500 for drug offense 50% of the population 1,869% increased days incarcerated 208,000 for the drug offense 195% increase. The convictions negatively impacted African American communities. Constitutional law for the first one, harsher sentencing, and emphasis on enforcement of the expensive treatment. 828 every 100,000 African Americans was arrested, composing 38% of the population, split from 200,000 to 2 billion from the majority due to drug convictions. The war was designed to fail. Penalties have increased drug use, stigmatization, surveillance, disease, the transmission, and incarceration that served 21 more drugs based on misunderstanding of addictions. The terrorists have been counterproductive, an increase in consumption, incarceration, plus lower life expectancy, excessive treatment, prison, isolated people as deprived education, exacerbate mental health problems that generate lifelong obstacles. Surveillance can be distressing. Prohibition, otherwise programs to reduce disease transmission to perpetrate stigma, discourages users from seeking health prohibition, precludes disease from markets, programs to criminalization directly linked to police brutality, unregulated markets that result in drugs of inconsistent purity, blocking agents of toxic addictives, reductions in the community safety exacerbated by exposure to state violence, including assault that target black people will more likely to be incarcerated, longer sentences for drug offenses, black and Hispanic adolescents are discharged from the treatment to incarceration. There's overwhelming consensus amongst scholars, researchers, activists that ending the war on drug requires decriminalizing the psychoactive substance. The citizens must lobby for drug use to be considered a problem of public health. It's black people disproportionately incarcerated for the drug use program by its legal scholars, the sociologists, psychologists who call for decriminalization of the psychoactive substances. Enter the war on drugs. The war on drugs averse and health while harming communities. The war foster a condescending moralism that casts drug use as a criminal. Studying the war and investigating communities will improve health, reduce recidivism, lower poverty, drug laws, perpetrate explicit racism, black Hispanic member police force based incarceration, harsher penalties, practices, successful vulnerabilities within communities. What is needed is a shift in how we think about drugs. The use of position should be excluded from the criminal law. Policymakers should pursue decriminalization or ground for legal systems to develop decriminalization, harm reduction, strongly advice when problems with misuse of rights should be approached as through healthcare and social support. This is called for citizens to lobby representatives and for policymakers to draw and cast legislation and sure tiers on the ballot. Decriminalization allows users to seek medical treatment, healthcare, and social support. In Portugal, it reduced mortality to 82% lower than the mean that served 21. The decriminalization makes drug use safer and eliminates injustices with incarcerating and drug use in Portugal. The decriminalization will harm reduction, lower rates of substance use disorders, overdoses, HIV, dose. Portugal's drug mortality was lower than EU, for compared to 2 million users did not perceive it as criminal charges. They seek medical treatment and social support as social institutions based on harm reduction, help young people. Decriminalization enabled officials to deliver housing, health, and assistance. Decriminalization is critical to the success of harms reduction strategies. Otherwise, a stigma and mistrust allows police to crack down on activists. That's Marine 19 harms reduction practice. Substance use programs still depend on judgment and acceptance of operates ideologically opposed to prohibition. Criminalization hinders harms reduction by increasing stigma and stealing hostility in healthcare. Healthcare programs are defending criminalization as a virtue. Harms reduction proven efficacy of harms reduction most effective with decriminalization. Continued criminalization of harms reduction by creating climate stigma. Drug use is considered deviant because it is illegal. Drug community face a stigma based on stereotypes as immoral engenders social exclusion. The social exclusion and internalized deviant label those who use drugs to be stigmatized as criminal. Stigma creates a barrier to support education to the treatment medical services that ameliorate harms with drug use. With drug use results and when alleviated, individuals utilize harms reduction. Users are hesitant to utilize harms reduction due to mistrust and fear of prejudice. Black, Indigenous, and queer drug users depend on grassroots harms reduction as a survival strategy. That's doubting and 20% of the people from communities who survive mutual aid is robust history. The LGBT community mutual aid is political participation, not just enough representatives, but building new relationships with potential commitments that heroes speak elected to encourage people use networks to exist at the intersection of edits, stigmatized identity individuals do not care anymore. organized anti-cross exchanges among queer people use drugs like queer trans people use drugs that are to mutually related. The survival tends to tend to be underground because harms reduction are criminalized. Black Latinx and indigenous people who use drugs are punished. Organizations like Steady Collective, Knoxville, and Juicy provide harm reduction, including home test cases of medical bags and testing for hepatitis to queer and trans safe users. Safe injection facilities have reduced mortality by 35%. This martial level of mortality reduced SAF 35% reduction after opening the other city club and after 9% SAFs are not associated with injecting facilities are safe and effective with 500 injections per year. Safe has been highly accepted by users. SAF is well received by women in First Nations. Efforts to expand services to reach vulnerable third afraid low overdoses attributed to a combination of drugs. The shift to harms reduction requires the reconfiguring the fundamental logic of policing. That's Cameron's Clause 719 for protection of harms marginalized people experience police. This constituted fundamental reconfiguring of policing from people constructed as offenders to citizens with decriminalization was important prerequisite for harms reduction. People are no longer arresting people who use drugs that contributed positively to relationships with citizens. Decriminalization, the right to police people to take interest in marginalized people who use drugs, but a criminalized relationship between those will be hostile to decriminalization, enable a police abstain from traditional law enforcement. Police direct attention to wider harms experienced by people who use drugs. Thus, the plan, the United States federal government should enact substantial criminal justice reform in the United States and policing and or sentencing by at least decriminalizing psychoactive substances. The past, the success of harms reduction has been the direct result of grassroots movements with sustained advocacy is key. That's where 19 to date regarding harms reduction and deterrence of prohibition have been available to policymakers. Harms reduction is still considered controversial and programs remain scarcely funded. Harms reduction emerged from advocacy. People who rejected drugs to grassroots movements was by advocacy and social mobilization. The harms reduction became normative. It is by these processes that drug policies can be reformed in line with harms reduction. Decriminalization is ambitious but achievable. That's Stephen 17. The past 15 years, what has changed the foreign drugs after use of harsh penalty by force. Many policymakers began to repeal draconian drug policies, repealing mandatory minimum sentences, creating treatment sentences, decriminalizing the possession. There's a clear public and policymakers support moving on the war on drugs results that embrace of treatment rather than criminalization is appropriate response to substance abuse. Dismantling the war on drugs is no small P policy requires political will. The movement is significant marks the shift from drug policies passed in the 80s and 90s. Attacks criminal reforms and changes in public perception will insulate jurisdictions to dismantle the war on drugs. Reforms are empirically successful. The policy-driven solutions drove down incarceration in multiple states. It's trying to change the catalyst for the population was close to the priorities tough and crime population making descent leading 6% from 2009 to 1960 factors like directly declines going back war on drugs policy and very interested evidence-based led purchase declining function as the court rulings Connecticut, Michigan, Mississippi, Rhode Island, South Carolina achieved prison reductions of 25%. Other states also experienced significant reductions, including California, New York, and New Jersey. States are geographically and politically diverse and active policies to produce outcomes. Population reductions were achieved through policy reforms. Decriminalizing harms reduction begins with a discourse that promotes practices of care. That's definitely 15 practices of care. Most users tips for managing healthcare problems passed by word of mouth. How the only way to stay alive is in exchanges service of providers and encourage the clients to assure harms reduction info with appears to promote safer drug consumption, lot of alienation from mainstream healthcare and initiating discussion about harms reduction, crucial in engaging consumers in conversations about health policy. We have to start with the conversation about what people want. Rom, are there any more cards?
No. Damn. Did you cut anything?
Nah, I'm just
Okay.
too fast.
All right.
40 seconds left. Give me a second. Wow, I thought I had more time. All right. You're good for cross?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I want to start about asking about your none evidence. He says that the war on drugs has formed the basis of European conquest over the global south and the maintenance of white supremacy. Could you explain how Kenneth Nunn comes to this conclusion and why his analysis is credible?
He just cites empirical examples such as, broad CIA foreign policy and claims that foreign policy has been structured around using illegally smuggling drugs into communities of color in the United States and using that smuggling to prosecute POC.
Uses that okay, all right. Nunn says that Reagan's racist rhetoric ostracized drug users and reassured white America in the aftermath of the counterculture movement. Why is decriminalizing only psychoactive substances sufficient to solve like a historical legacy of racism?
All of our solvency evidence, I think the Murray evidence and the Stephen evidence, all of those pieces of evidence just broadly gesture at how decriminalization and focus on harms reduction restructures public discourses and focus on drug use as stigma, as criminalized, and shifts it towards like decriminalization. It shifts public opinion.
And it shifts public opinion?
Yeah.
How so?
Because it no longer criminalizes drug users, so there's no longer a social transcription of drug users as criminal, as deviant.
Okay, all right. I want to talk about one of your other non-pieces of evidence. It says, quote, the CIA ferried opium produced out of Laos. CIA relied on heroin to finance ops in Afghanistan and cocaine to fund cocaine for Contras. Which card establishes a reverse causal claim about how you resolve the CIA taking opium out of the country and shipping it to, Afghanistan and to other places, like to Laos?
Yeah, so the bottom paragraph that is cut in the piece of evidence makes it clear that the primary incentive, the reason why the CIA restructured its foreign policy around illegal smuggling, is because what they would do is they would illegally smuggle drugs, obtain them from foreign countries, and just flood them in American communities. Then when people of color use those drugs, they would arrest them.
Oh, I see. Okay. The premise
Yeah.
of my question was incorrect. I have a question about status quo safe injection facilities.
Mhm.
Does the federal government have any oversight over them now?
No, generally they are all they're all private actor, led
Okay.
by activist organizations like the Safety
I guess
Network, stuff like that.
why is the federal government required to sort of resolve any of these safe injection organizations or not?
What do you mean by resolve safe injection?
I guess why is federal action key for success for safe injection?
Because
facilities?
right now, safe injection facilities are criminalized when they give medical assistance to people who use drugs. The police go to these facilities, say there's drug use occurring at these facilities, so we should arrest the people involved.
When Kenneth
Decriminalizing
Nunn
drugs,
has
yeah.
written a number of articles about Black nationalism and Eurocentric law, why should we invest in the myth of the law to govern safe injection facilities?
I mean, the two are not mutually exclusive. We've just outlined that decriminalization is a good idea.
I think your author disagrees.
Okay. The one in C is sent. Is everyone good for an order? All right, it's 6 off, then case. Just give me a thumbs up whenever I'm good to start.
I'm still opening it, but I'll let you know.
Yeah, just give me a verbal confirmation or a thumbs up and your way to beauty.
All right, yeah, I'm good.
I'm ready to.
Judge, you're good? Sick, all right. Criminal justice denotes institutions distinct from criminal law. Bernard criminal justice police go towards institutions distinct from criminal law and defines and by law. And policing reform must target practice in the police policies, police organizations directly. NAACP 20. Policing reform that police practices of police officers rather than holding accountable even though the government training and surrounding even the ambassador committees. And sentencing reform must target decisions over use period and termination of confinement, which are sending voluntary and violates the plan of ex-criminal law, but not itself criminal justice. Vote neg. There are thousands of laws on the books which limits disaster, gives access to solvency mechanisms that access advantage of legalization. There are dozens zeros fairness, at least in a plan is independent voter for vagueness. Let them be a moving target. Zeros black clash. Go next off. Interpretation. The 1AC must use the 3-period TOC to justify the plan CGI. They violate because academics are grounds or personal experiences, organic intellectuals. Read briefly. The 3 should can validate the professor here and action training such conclusion for personal background as academics political communities affected and access is a voter normative knowledge making practice are steeped into expert vernaculars that cried out minority participation, which are prerequisite to debates benefits. Seizure policy analysis stands in 3 tiers, leads to distancing that demobilize politics toward interpassivity and secures psychic violence. Next off, these United Slave States, federal diggers here has got to let us get high as a cut. You dig it? What's that shit? Mission challenge language be that shit. Stuck to a nigga like Belfo. Let it flip them switch and alter expose us their American English and kill cage birds. Morrison 93. The language you do, the language is the language at least also wants to let their business feed accountable even those that are communities are access to those in the parts of language and the language and also language also goes over plus apartment visual changes supernatural law people and kids to the material homelessness and next off. Put decrim movement on a timeout during Zoom debate. Uncritical attempts to carry out debate in virtual exacerbate Zoom fatigue, which is exhausting for Black people. Reading grassroots app next year solves. Now they're 20. Word is Johnson is isolating even those that have broadcasting feels more connected than the user in the screen and then the side of central tracks and only students who are writing long present a great space relationship and everything only being a role of conversation and adoption of and accompanying hard stress and party and body ages and it seems the worst economic ability limits of human projection and that's off. The plan is inspired by impotent repetition, compulsion, perversely attached to racism. Turns case only the no of presumption challenges the lacking of economy of desire. Lumberto, the demand is a company. Moving beyond impressions of lives and will even those under demand dreams little functionally those and subjects for including other cities hiring language and those that demand with less calls for orders another kind of knocked every those one of the things that should reduce the economy of those that are subject to action and the company will break between the masters and possible being possible. And next off. Racism is not the product of policies like the drug war, but it's a political economy mediated by surplus criminality, an endless cycle of contraction and expansion where the Euro-American state must manufacture crisis as shore of public support. Even the end of the drug war can't change an anti-Black culture that hails Blacks to endlessly play the role of threat to future the legitimacy of policing institutions. One I see none too. American culture has to be reshaped and law is an extension of white power and the emphasis of legal codification is intrinsically extra for rational durable jurisprudence which reinforces civilizational mantras harms reduction in the war on drugs grants legitimacy to Eurocentric institution that manufactures consensus around enslavement. It's more pragmatic to reject the Fed's olive branch. 1 AC 997. The laws that advantages of residents when president white and Eurocentric even though there's a personal chance that the political solid has been allowed to go away no matter the resident national award even those of the world views of any contract and ingredients of the nation many lobbying changes that allows them in those family even places that are in the western robbing golden statement and refuse a model of debate centered around federal agents. The technical language of legal elites provides protective service to white cultural hegemony that is to make arguments in the terms of white laws, submits to enslavement and zeros energy and accountability to Black communities. 1 AC 997. A lot of solutions the plans for aggressive CGR is cracker democracy. It defangs Black autonomy by investing in harms reduction initiatives from external institution. Love 2-1. I don't know. White supremacy, even those doing the world, and self-centered nature, higher policy protection, and beliefs of the representation, higher policy, even those rights and mainstream defeating the law, black race, and we see Black objection, the problem, the refusing the becoming the streets, the trade off the Black people, the West Indian independent, progress, and cold and not profiting those of Black independence, and between argument for us and mainstream, because the president, under the autonomy, the damage of information condition, and vote egg to endorse Black nationalism. Only Black autonomy solves causes, not symptoms like the carceral system. 1 AC 912. We have those physical business structure and African to Black national currency, African autonomy, African all these tribes that we need to know cultural realities and anything culture and trend that had African business and Friday ones way to opportunities and dominant African institutions agreements to see and those policy research and fields that are African Mr. Point and solution to regarding causes not symptoms and case. First, weasel words, including substantial on the plan, is weasel words that make the mandates of the AF hollow. Garner 11. Weasel words, even those in those under substantially. And A, turn solvency, strategic and beauty, zeros the AF, Donaldson. The problem is usually words, even if that claims the words that creates a hard horizontal alliance. And second, harm reduction is bad frame. They entrench discrimination pathologizing pleasure. So on the 16, a precedent. problem and pressure in the left of criminality, those aligned, even those that are pressured with tries to make sure he's readers with those that are in the reverse, and the walkers, misunderstood, who will try to have about the core with the resources limitation connected, the social student and family background, who's in groups dedicated on the limit criminal activity. Third, plan doesn't stop war on drugs. A, foreign DEA will crack down on cartels in Latin America and interstate commerce, which is racialized. B, Biden and Kamala made their name on drug prosecution, the only and criminal, not civil sentences related to drugs. C, even if drugs can't be police will make other excuses to search during routine traffic stops. Presidential Reddit control link Woodford in the 2003. President consistent motivation to those who are going to march thing over those who are the president of the racial or also reserves and even those that are in president doesn't only part of safe web agenda that is empirical through the president structure even the federal bureaucracy. And 5, and 1AC Duff says promote practices of care. Those will be anti-black. Martina 15 through cut the card at a liberal. Oh, it just shot me all the way up. The Martina 15 card, you can cut it at a liberal project, and I didn't read the 6, the Cruise 18 evidence.
All right, Rom, did you get that? Okay. Can you hear me all right, by the way?
Yeah, you don't need a cut version, right? You guys are good.
Oh yeah, no, I think we're good, right, Rom?
All right.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. Let's talk about this Nunn critique. The first piece of evidence from Nunn says it focuses on criminality, and it says that the war on drugs is one form of the surplus criminality theory. Why can't the AF be a prerequisite to disrupt American or change or disrupt American culture?
Because quotes from the 1AC, so for example, quotes from the 1AC identified that drug war is sort of what undergirds all of American culture, and the affirmative reverses the criminalization of different people of color. We disagree with that premise. None disagree with that premise, which means that you are incorrect. The second portion of that is
that's not my question. Yeah, go ahead.
The second thing is using the law to mediate that first step to resolve the drug war as an inroads to whatever else to resolve the thesis of surplus criminality that we have forwarded is a bad sort of frame as per Nunn.
Okay. Well, my question, like the very last lines that Nunn isolates are the culpability of African people in the Euro-American mind is not limited to drugs. This is a specific instance of the general problem, and to address the general problem, American culture has to be reshaped. My question is, like, in the form of the permutation in which we do the affirmative, we end criminalization of drugs and we implement the advocacy. Why can't we reshape American culture?
The AF doesn't end criminalization of drugs. You used to USFG, right? That's what our main arguments are in case about Biden and Kamala Harris standing majority of their having to govern on policies like drug prosecution, and also the K is very clear on how the drug war on drugs is an endless cycle. The judge voting AF in this round does nothing in this round or outside of this round. Your AF
that makes sense to me. I mean,
it might as well just be a camp AF, dude.
Okay, sure. That all makes sense. What is the alternative to participation in Eurocentric law?
Black nationalism.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Nunn is a black nationalist.
What black nationalist movements exist right now?
It's not a question of what black nationalist movements exist right now, but they do. Like, for example, the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, founded by Davon Love and Devin Cooper, is a pretty prominent example of that. But
do those black nationalists...
Nunn evidence,
go ahead. Yeah.
Our Nunn evidence says that sort of positing an alternative to Eurocentric law would be good to create sort of black businesses, black education facilities, etc., that are external to white institutions.
Why can't decriminalize? What those do black nationalist movements support decriminalization?
Sure,
would decriminalization
but those should not be centered on U.S. Those should not be
communities?
centered on Eurocentric law.
Okay, so Eurocentric law exists. Black nationalist movements are empowered. Eurocentric law still exists that criminalizes drugs. How do the black nationalist movements overcome criminalization of drugs if the Eurocentric law still exists?
Because they have the ability to create safe injection sites,
that will be cracked down on by the police. This just seems like the 1AC.
No, that's incorrect, because black nationalist sites have the ability to evade and maneuver around white Eurocentric law.
We have 10 minutes starting now. All right, we stop prep at 8:30. I'm sending it out. And while I'm doing that, Akil, do you want to put 8:30 in the chat so we don't forget? It's sent. The order is the advantage, T criminal law, the body politics, the counterplan that, like the normal counterplan. And the Zoom optimism or Zoom fatigue, the procedural, and the criticism, the non-criticism.
Let me give that to you. Oh wait, never mind. I see it on the document. We're good.
Okay.
Wait. I don't have the doc. Sorry. My bad.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Yep. Got it.
All right. Anyone not ready? Great. I'm gonna turn off my lamp. Okay. War on drugs is a war against minorities. Reagan and Bush deliberately labeled drug users as deviant to reassure white Americans the aftermath of the counterculture movement. The after results three impacts. One, incarceration. 50% of people are federal prisoners. Therefore, drug-related crimes. Drug policies drove mass incarceration from 200,000 to 2 million. Second is harm reduction. Black, indigenous, and queer Christian numbers for safe injection, HIV testing, and support are criminalized as a result of current drug policies. Activists have said the app is a necessary survival strategy. Independently, safe injection facilities reduce mortality rates by 35%. Third is stigma. Criminalizing drug use causes people to internalize the deviant label, which makes them less likely to seek out support. 2AC, no one to see one. The plan says at least, so obviously we would at least cycle the decriminalized psychoactive substance, which means the weaseling argument doesn't make sense. Harm reduction is good. One, it does not account for the action of the plan, which eliminates stigma by removing the deviant label, which is a result of the counterculture movement, which is a result of the war on drugs. That's one I see here. Yes, we stopped the war on drugs first. They say the forum, but that was started by America, which is a statement evidence. Regardless, it is not our burden to put out every single fire worldwide, which is basically the same logic that justified American imperialism in the first place. That is what we dismantled. They say that you only end criminal, not civil laws, but that's wrong. Policing includes civil laws. Contrary to Law 11, policing were first by law first applies to welcome to general health, safety, welfare, moral, society, realistic community behavior. The policing, the prevention, action, investigation, prosecution of crime, regardless, empirics respond to it because we're working in North Carolina, Mississippi, Michigan, all decriminalized drugs, reduce or decriminalize some the types of drugs, reduce prison population by 25%. They have not read evidence that this is even a thing. And plus, civil penalties are super small compared to criminal penalties, so we don't actually need a winner. Regardless, the Afro gets 2 million people out of jail immediately, which is an impact that you can hang your hat on. Presidential rhetoric is the status quo. Only the affirmative can reverse it by dismantling the war on drugs. Regardless, Biden and Kamala prove why engaging with the government is not necessarily good, but rather essential, because it's the only way that we can dismantle the racist rhetoric that is built into the criminal justice system, that is built into the government. Criminal law, we meet that plan. CJR2, we meet if they're right about their interpret. The plan does not change criminal law, but the way those laws are pleased to counter the criminal. We counter criminal justice means control crime. Does in criminal law use criminal justice means the crime control confers criminal law, including prosecutorial services and I already read that. 3, Afghan, all decriminalize ambiguous statute, financial crimes. 4, education, the book of the CGR, deals with problems that are criminal laws. 5, precision derived defines criminal justice and academic discipline, not as an area of policy, and defines police, not policing. 6, no limits offense, because he's switching making money, change to policing or sentencing. 7, functional limits, East state and politics. 8, default to reasonability, because subsequent was minor under limiting. They say we're vague. We are not vague. We have made it very clear that at the very least we would decriminalize psychoactive substances. The reason why we say at least in our plan text is because that is where our solvency advocate says. They said that decriminalization can be a jumping off point for future reforms, such as legalization, and it should stop we also defended decriminalizing psychoactive substances, which means that there's no impact of the class differential, the body politics. We meet 1, we have cited advocate. 2nd is we have been compelled to read the affirmative, because obviously we do know people who use drugs, which means that broader bylines between this consultation and personal experience are irrelevant. Right, briefly, I Swiss organic intellectual searches, the key is personal experience. Counter ask it to choose as best. 8 is forced outing. Their interpretation of forced debaters talk about their personal experiences, even if they may be violent or traumatizing. That's obviously bad, but our interpret does not preclude personal discussion. 2nd is identity militarization. Forced debaters talk about experiences, positive personal experiences against each other. For the ballot, you can't falsify someone's identity, so the debate turns into personal attacks. C is authenticity, testing only valid or negative strategies just prove the sum's experiences, which is bad. A Trinity debate is a game is best. 1st is rules, guidelines like speech order, speech times, words counts, prove that all debate is inherently competitive. 2nd is a valid to no judge. The judge determines a winner and a loser, which means that parallels the structure of a game. It's also the normal counterpoint primitive about different vernacular for different people. The non-black speaking, the non violent. The perm combines linguistic advocacy to avoid co-option. 2nd, this solves kinship languages. The black people relate to the planet Noma, whites in English, Hispanic populations in Spanish, and Asian debaters in Hindi, Chinese, or any number of languages. The 1EC advocated the plan in our vernacular, but did not advocate that vernacular. Perm to the counterpoint competition totally based on that the text function of the plan. 1, implementation is identical, or differences are effectual, which we can preview. 2nd, it's not sexually competitive, being distinct is not competition. 3rd is no performative competition, requires the model in the politics, because that assumes that all speeches are active transferable. The later returns the bound into a market of ideas, which cause commodification and turns their argument vernacular as acts of accommodation also doesn't make sense, because different people would hear the plan in different languages based on where they are. Counterpoints that feel the possibility of the plan or pick out a word, or but usually no compared to literature discursion, region, topic education, and new staff fairness, because we can't leverage the 1AC's offense using the language of white lights. It's also because Solvency 1, because of infiltration, congresspersons react with backlash and politically sequester advocates speaking nominal. They should have to defend the plan proposed in nominal. The Athens winner is a form of subtle deviance that widens the cracks and fishes of the light speaks. The Zoom optimism, procedural 1, non-resolution theory is bad news every which source affirmative ground. 2nd is everyone experiences Zoom fatigue. It's just a question of getting over it, regardless of benefits of debate outweigh. We should also debate criminal justice reform, even if it is exhausting, because activism is not easy. Zoom fatigue is inevitable. Science people in 20 tips get rid of Zoom fatigue. Reface it, avoid must limit your cause, use your power voice, and get up and move, focus on positive, have your meetable, nice figure, who to win a horse, or one just as horse. So what's your power? Would you choose to have? What was your favorite TV show put on your work clothes, which is a digital ice cream that you speaker. If you try to move on activity and by the Zoom look at the workout, block yourself, know the learn how to be funny and prepare yourself, give yourself a social piece, and it's a double turn, because they are also advocating on Zoom the analyst procedure. The entire app is a link to this. The only way we can change the repetitive compulsion attached to racism is by normalizing practices of care. 4 warrants. 1 is the strong public voice is key to decriminalization. Our strengths and statement evidence cites movements in Connecticut, California, Michigan, North Carolina, which all pass legislation to decriminalize drugs and feed millions, which means it isn't some fantasy scenario. 2nd is grassroots organizing, only learning the language of the state that can allow us to infiltrate. 3rd is breaking down stigma. They have zero game on this. Every card in the 1AC said that stigma surrounding drugs is what ostracizes drug users in the first place. 4th, the student says the critical thinkers is good for scenario forecasting. The K framework determines the alpha of the plan's enactment against the competitive alternative for the consequences of the plan. They must defend uniqueness and KK. The all that's best. A is class hypothetical and consequences of the planner are the locus of affirmative offense. And then the ultimate conclusion of our scholarship letting us weight is a prerequisite to equitable engagement, which is essential to capturing all the unique educational benefits of the debate. 2nd is advocacy. Plan focus allows us to be proto-institutional, learn the language of the state, and effectuate change independently. Our discourse and scholarship are productive. Normalizing harm reduction in academic spaces, destigmatizes drug use, and encourages the adoption of public health measures over punitive ones. That stuff. I just realized I forgot to respond to one of the arguments on case. practices up here are not anti-black. It is based off movements that can fix it under their model, which means that if you think these practices are anti-black, you can always use your own movement organizing skills to make them better. Permutation both. They have cited none 97, but 5 years later, we have cited evidence that says that now none is advocating for the ending of the war on drugs. None advocates the which proves it's not mutually exclusive. The permutation uses the Eurocentric law to dismantle itself. For permutation, you use the affirmative and the actor of the alternative. People who want to engage the state should, and people who don't want to, then don't have to. Permutation don't want the or either the can overcome has code overwhelms the affirmative. Our theory is far more expenditory power. We've traced the war on drugs as the contingent political action during the Reagan and Bush administration. Surplus criminality is the problem. We've critiqued the stigma and deviant label that is solidified by the war on drugs. That's Arab talking about the law is good unless it dismantle the problems within that law. It allows us to remove the stigma, allow harm reduction that independently reduces mortality by 35%. They say refuse the model of debate around federal agents, but it's critical to move this successful move organizing as an analogous to mainstream policy requires skilled organization, strategic flexibility, and effective management to be proto-institutional. Heller 17 moves 60 to high organized, strategically flexible, and attempting to limit NAACP people ready to march Washington. The Kennedy support participate to the power principles were act out the national real words of comfortable which harmony infrastructure ability to call in favor of mainland politics and dismiss participating in government because we have programs that prove impossible such a bad illusion. They favor protecting supervisor authorities. No plan more compromising in theory the practice. And we need more mayors, folk politics, tracing anticipation, insurance fighters, and heroism. System must be voted without setting people. Stop government remains messy, so frustrating. More than 2 steps after our country took first such union making for policy, some such frequently stumbling. They say it bangs black autonomy. One, we do not invest in harm reduction. We decriminalize psychoactive substance. Then prevent crackdown. Second, it is non-unique. They're forced underground now. Third is that it does not de-energize the black activism because providing a lifting off point only enables that the alternative does not solve. A is crackdown. Mutual kitchen networks like Steady Collective and Do It Safe are cracked down upon. Second is police presence. So continue to antagonize drug users unless we decriminalize substances independently. Proving that USFG action can be successful beats the thesis. One is incarceration. Policy reform shorten incarceration by over 25%. Second is harm reduction. Reduce mortality by 35%. That's Marshall. Advocating the decriminalization of drugs in debate is good. First is agency simulate. No, skip that. Saturation is inevitable. Good debate, create skills, necessary translate ideas, mutual intent, discord, remnants, imperfect affairs, where the drowning in the surplus information. The agenda is also to do is storing massive evidence into systematic communicative dexterity, name of translation for such a cooperative work argument, for analytic product. Argumentation provides analytic product. I'm ready for cross.
Could you just send the recut out for cross? Thanks.
Yeah. I think I cut more than one card, so yeah.
Oh yeah, that would be great.
Send it out. All right, it's I spoke too soon. Okay, yeah, I spoke too soon. Let's see. Okay, now it's sent. Sorry, it took me a little while. You can let me know when you get it, or we can start cross-ex now, whichever.
You can start cross-ex now if you want. No matter to me.
Okay, sure.
You good?
Yeah.
Steeman says 50% of federal crimes are drug related. Why not release the other 50%?
We have not made a claim that that would be bad. We have simply isolated political advocacy that would let 2 million people out of jail. If your argument is that that proves the F is a bad idea, I don't think that makes sense. Like that's like saying the world is messed up. So if you try to fix something, then that's a bad thing to do. We think that's a bad ideology. It means
I
that
don't think
we
those
get locked in a cycle. We would get locked in a cycle where nobody wants to change.
Okay. Both pieces of 1AC ERP evidence cite Portugal. Will you defend Portugal's model of decriminalization, including no penalties for days' supply of psychoactive substances, but mandatory drug rehabilitation for quantities beyond that?
We defend a decriminalization of psychoactive substances. That Portugal empiric is solely to prove how harm reduction facilities can be effective. We will defend the political advocacy we have read in the 1EC. Like we're not going to defend some random thing they did in Portugal. Like I know, I mean, it's not random, of course. Like we reference that as an effective system of decriminalization, but like, no,
why
would be the exact legislative proposal they had?
What is so different about the plan in your AF that makes Biden want to decriminalize drugs and release all these people out of prison?
I'm kind of confused about your question. Are you asking like how our political advocacy is going to like spill up to do that? Or are you asking like how would like in a simulation, how would this?
I'm saying why would he want to do it now? 2021, April 18th.
Yeah, he probably wouldn't. That's the point, right? We're simulating a situation in which we did do that. And we're talking about why that would be good to break down stigma of the deviant label of drug users. The whole point is that
that's fine. I do stop talking. What harms are reduced through decriminalization?
millions of people are in jail. People are dying because of lack of access to safe injection facilities. People are being cracked down upon. I think those qualify as harms.
Safe injection facilities.
Do you want me to keep
Safe-
going? There's
No,
more.
that's fine.
Yeah.
What grassroots harms reduction strategies does the
Do you mind if I just cut in real quick?
Yeah, you got it, Hush.
List of permutations on the K. It's perm do both, perm agent of the alt, USFT does to plan, and what is the third perm?
Give me a sec. I close. Okay. I think that was.
It was double bind. It was double bind.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah, you're good. What grassroots harm reduction strategies does the AF enable? And why is
I think the Steeman evidence like isolates like 8, but it's not like isolated to those, right? It's about broader grassroots
why
activism,
is federal action key to their success?
Because right now they're being cracked down upon. Like, for example, it cites the example of Tim Santimore, who was forced underground with his harm reduction facilities and now is able to help far, far less people. Our evidence indicates that a better strategy would be to decriminalize drugs so that people like Tim Santimore, Do It Safe, Steady Collective can help more people overcome addiction.
I'm taking prep. What are the reasons to reject the team?
Akil, I think that there was theory arguments, but I don't think there are reasons to reject the team. Just arguments like
Just list the theory arguments as well.
like extra resolutional theory. Akil, do you remember? Like, let me check. I'll just scroll up my document. Oh, I think I said word picks or pay. Like, here, let me see the exact interpretation. Oh yeah, counterplans that fiat the possibility of the plan are bad. And yeah, that's it.
Stop prep 3, 7 left. Is everybody good for an order? Okay. It's Zoom optimism, analyst, Nomo counterplan, K, then case.
One more time.
Yeah, for sure. Zoom optimism procedural, analyst, counterplan, K, case.
Case. That's it.
All right. Anybody not good?
Yeah, I'm still opening up the 2NC. I'll let you know.
Yeah, oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah, I'm good now.
Okay. Barth, you're fine. Cool. Not going for Zoom optimism, non-resolution procedures are not going to be made anywhere else. The double turn argument is not unique, which means that they engage in Zoom as well, so it's not a reason to reject us. Analyst procedure not going for numerous performance, grassroots movement, stigma, etc. are going to be answered on the critique. The number kind of concede permutation about theoretical objections or reasons to reject the argument, not the team. The alternative is not a pick that has the possibility of doing the plan. Infiltration is not a solvency deficit to the critique. The non-K. Two framing issues. One, cross-ex confirm that none is a credible author. We are explicitly conceding that since none is a black naturalist who criticize engagement with the law, they don't get takebacks. They can't disagree with what one none says because it's the top of the 1EC and central to their theorization of the war on drugs and quote European conquest. Otherwise, it's non-black fluidity that refuses to take accountability for their scholarly choices, which is anti-black. Two, weaponizing black scholars against their own agendas is fungibility. They take nuns' words, rip them apart for original context, and defend the law and a warped vision of the war on drugs. That's how white people sever black people from their words and ideas. That's exactly how whites can respin BLM to justify all lives matter, or how the alt-right claims that MLK is on their side for the January 6th riots. Since riots are the language of the unheard, argumentative irresponsibility is an independent voting issue. Line by line framework. One, role to judges to evaluate competing models of cultural hegemony. Case about their moody following BS political program that sustains 1EC justifications or anti-black. Two, semiotics are a prior question. 1EC none says the drug war and surplus criminality are sustains the rhetorical choices. So the first 1EC guard says, quote, the centerpiece was rhetorical strategy that demonizes drug use. Quote, the rhetoric of the war helps shape strategies to combat the threat. And quote, Reagan's rhetoric tap into cultural attitudes about people call and links to drug use. Cultural shifts are crucial to challenge semiotic articulations in mentioning race and crime, which proves pragmatic focus on policy is sufficient. That's proven by public surveys. 1 and C902. Whites associate blacks with criminal activities. Retained with people of color. This is observable in every survey ever. Some of the white majority are suspicion of blacks because they cause crime. The U.S. examples are criminal justice as race suppression, death penalty, police brutality, denial of counsel. The criminal justice system may be the fifth venue where race practice continue. Racism is creation of crime. The race of virgin going to cause for more criminal events and harsher criminal punishments for racism. Hold sway as a persuasive force. Evidence towards criminalism.
Akash, you cut off.
Looks like his internet just Akash.
You cut off.
Yeah, for like the last like 15 seconds probably.
Yeah, no, I stopped time at like 150.
Yeah. Okay. I had myself at 6:05. Is my mic gone?
No, you're good on the mic part.
Really?
Akash.
Oh, okay. So then do you
Yeah,
mind
your
if
internet just stopped
Yeah,
for a second.
okay. Do you mind if I just so I finished this nun recutting
Yeah.
and do you mind if I just continue off from there?
Yeah.
Cool.
That's
Sorry about that. My bad. Okay. So I'm just gonna start now then. Cool. Okay. Clash 1. Clash is a product of white cultural hegemony. It can be an intrinsic good because competition is ever evolving, and there's no procedural plan focus rule for negative scenes. Infinite aggression claim is in bad faith because there's 2 decades of black debate, and the affirmative gets first or last speech to make the best defense of TGR. 2. Psychological enslavement term non-impact turns fairness, weighing the case as a middle ground course of black students to speak and reason in the same technical style as white debate, forcing strict adherence to rule-bound terms, reinforces psychological enslavement through exterminating cultural practices intrinsic to black debate. Psychic files precludes meaningful participation in debates, benefits, advocacy skills, non-impact turns legal skills, which is a disadvantage of the reputation. 3. Warrants 1. Psychic files making arguments couched in expertly technical terms, ideologically reinforce the legitimacy of Eurocentricity. Black activists and allies are forced to internalize legal thinking. The non-evidence says legal education coerces black scholars to pay homage to white thinkers like Cicero or Rawls, which is still complicit in Eurocentricity. 2. Activist brain drain. Becoming proficient in the legal technique takes time and energy from African communities to educate in white institutions, which makes black liberation movements less effective. None is explicit about the trade-off between learning legalese and time spent with black culture and community that turns racism since it precludes crafting solutions from the bottom up. 3. Elites bad. The higher you rise in legal hierarchy, so less effective you are at passing reform. Activist lawyers and judges are sanctioned by conservatives, which stops them in political clout necessary to help black folks and movements. Now, your discourse is bad. Legal codification, like even the affirmative imagination, could train advocates to movements to theodice pedagogy is anti-black at the level of form. Imagining that plan durably and consistently implements rational policies that transcendently apply to all U.S. citizens, reinforces civilizational modular state, contrasts legal codification of decriminalizing psychoactive substances with informal political processes of black nationals like LBS or Gumby's Federation that entrenches psychic files or for blind evidence into entrenches Eurocentric thought that civilization only resides with the West. Now, permutation about this is going to be the winner. Nunn's conclusion of your 1AC article says that you solved nothing, which means that Nunn is not advocating for a war on drugs in earlier than your 1AC article. Mutual exclusivity war is false. Affirmative thinks that drug war is explanatory power. The 1AC authors disagree with that. None is explicit that negative state action fails. Read the third card of the 1AC shell. It says, quote, law cannot address racism. Permutation to the agent links were often since it still has the affirmative conduct reform through Eurocentric law, and it still is prone to the assumptions of the it still has assumptions of the affirmative. Otherwise, it's severance, which is a voting issue. Permutation to one is nonsensical. The affirmative is bad, which means you should not include it. They say that explanatory power stuff, boom, bustling negates their explanatory power. We control uniqueness. Racism is a political economy mediated by surplus capability. In the same way that Marxist theory envisions an economy that always requires a reserve pool of labor during times of growth, racism requires a surplus of black and brown folks to play the role of threat during times of crisis and to stand ready during periods of calm to await incoming crisis. Vilifying African Americans and Arabs is a crucial component of anti-black American culture to show public support for policing and the criminal justice system, but their misreading of Nunn that identifies the war on drugs as the sole arbiter of white supremacy perpetuates surplus criminality. The 1AC Chemist Guard explicitly states that the decriminalization of drugs fundamentally reconfigures offenders with rights. It says, quote, reduction of harms marginalized people experience was assailing conservative police. This constituted fundamental reconfiguring and policing from people constructed as offenders to citizens with rights, which their evidence disagrees with. The affirmative individual resolution to the drug war is just a contraction or bust period in racism's political economy. Ending the drug war would unquestionably put black folks under suspicion for street crime, welfare fraud, sexual violence, or they'll be marshaled as terrorists when Arab Americans fail to play their role. That concentrates wars on crime, the homeless, or terror, which turns affirmative offense. The AF can't solve incarceration stigma or white supremacy since the drug war is just a specific instance of surplus criminality. That's when you see none evidence that flips tried for the alternative to reshape American culture. They say that engaging the law is good, with just the Heller evidence, etc. The Heller evidence, etc. Movements don't do shit, which is going to be proven below when I'm answering the law stuff proper, but black nationalism is better, which is proven by their 1AC non-author. Movements fail. Murray 19, we read yellow. Harm reduction of power, introduce use of drugs policy based on research studies good voices goes against the validation of harm reduction, leadership with harm reduction, with the class workers, as harm reduction becomes called the reversal of the experience of drug use. We see limitations forbidding harm reduction, exclusion will result in proficiency, and movements will fall short, which proves that they don't really get any offense off of this argument. Investing in harm reduction, yes, the 1AC does so because it invokes the discourse of harm reduction repeatedly when discussing solvency mechanisms. Crackdown argument one, crackdown arguments are going to be answered. Crackdown arguments. I'll do the alternative here. It's black naturalism. You should prefer African autonomy that solves causes, not symptoms, to federal reform and cracker democracy that missed the point. Restoring the strength of black institutions like African schools and businesses provides employment and economic opportunity for black people, and it prevents the intergenerational transmission of values and ensures self-esteem of black folks. Strengthening black institutions solves surplus criminality since it likes black folks self-determine their future. That's none and the love evidence. If the discourse of criticizing the war on drugs has to divide the pig out of the planet, that case it through Afrocentric institutions solves 100% of the affirmative. 1AC 1970 oppression that is equal to black and psychological law, which is apparatus of justification, critical law, not to Eurocentric values, defense legitimacy, organization, limit the ability of African activists to contest white domination that resists Eurocentricity. African people must interpret law in their own cultural abilities, and African approach is grounded on in a non-material spiritual universe. To do this, law as we now know it can no longer exist. State good, proper. Now, the specific warrants about crackdown and police presence. 1, we are more pragmatic. None is more comparative and says from a pragmatic perspective, the law cannot be viewed as a positive force for change. Prefer black nationalism. They're both political and economic cloud for African institutions. 2, try or die for black nationalism. Pemberton 20, black nationalism was the tool that country used freedom and imperialism. The Reagan Malcolm that he was dangerous, his black people, which fights liberals propose integration and growth for white nationalism. Black nationalism will be a lot like other movements, interventions in the community, getting both policing schools, hospitals, controlled by the community allies, can get a visa to the U.S. secure. The police state already imposed imperialism. Malcolm X back communities and not by the odds. When white Americans overthrew the British, the deck was stacked. Trump says there are good people on both sides, white people are the devil. This created the necessary unity to engage in independence. But no, a state of the war is one that drains his own opportunity fights to people, the black community, to split service star park and no longer give us Medicare, abortion, and college. The United States speaks. There's no common unity for the white race now at the time. Inopportune death has been inevitable. That means today the opportunity for liberty accountability. 3, the alt remixes national realities, which builds social life despite the hostility of captivity. Be realistic. The made the impossible. Van Vieden, Anderson, 18. Social scientists must enter imaginary evidence into the definitive realities after future things fight the future as a building that calls for a black radical dreaming. So the social content in states can be remakes over new utopias, blood, collided politics of and pure eye for dias belonging to be given. Be realistic. Demands from Afro perspective. Say Black Lives Matter and not see the impossible, which is why such demand facts demand articulation to praxis. The participants connect black futurism to a game-based pedagogy focused on thinking through imagined efforts affordances that enable black people to strive for operation within personal environments that accompanied slavery. State good portion of the debate. 1, cross-apply offense for burning and engaging the state is effective since it causes psychic files, active spray trade, and elites or ineffective. That's there. 1, see author none. 2, no reform is disentangled race from criminality. Individual examples of progress are insufficient to prove the state is good since it's just an example of contraction in the political economy of surplus criminality. The only way to resolve it is to redefine race through shaping the entirety of American culture. The 1 see not evidence that's impossible since reform, quote, can only process bits and pieces of isolated parts of the problem in abstract form.
Before we start cross-ex, Akio and I are going to take a little bit of prep.
Sure.
All right, stop at 9:40. Let me put it in the chat, and then we'll start cross-ex. Okay, should be there. Okay. Is everyone ready? I don't see the judge, but I'm assuming. Okay, cool. All right, let me just pull up your document. Okay. First, what was your framework interp?
Our framework interp was the role of the judge is to evaluate competing models of cultural hegemony.
Okay. Okay. How does the negative change the social phenomenon of crime that all of your recuts of our evidence indicate that is necessary?
So Black nationalism is first and foremost a cultural practice that sort of disentangles race from criminality that is not accessible to institutions.
I got that, but it's not like there's more people than just Black nationalism. How do you the stigma exists not within Black nationalists, but within white supremacists in the government? What do you do about that?
Sure, but generating cultural hegemony through an ethos of Black nationalism is what shapes the public tide and resolves.
Okay, how do Black nationalists create cultural hegemony? Just walk me through how. I don't expect you to have specific steps, but just an idea of how they might do that.
So, for example, the creation of African-led businesses, education institutions. Our Pemberton evidence gives the example of Medicare, abortion facilities, etc. All of those are different practices that the alternative would endorse that are practical, and your evidence is in line with
I got that. So why is creating African businesses, medical institutions, why is any of that exclusive with decriminalizing psychoactive substances?
Because your 1AC evidence says that the decriminalizing psychoactive substances in and of itself is the wrong starting point. 1, because it invests in the law. 2, because it treats the war on drugs as an exceptional phenomenon.
Which evidence, which quote from none have you read that says decriminalizing would be bad? I'm just going to look through that evidence. I want to do a during prep.
So let me see.
Okay, just tell me which card, because I read your evidence. None of it.
The first 1AC none card. The first 1AC none card in the 1AC specifically says that if you repeal the war on drugs, it will still create sort of surplus criminality for African American and Arab folks that will be marshaled to fill the role of stigma.
So I don't get why we can't do both, and then you can solve that surplus criminality. Where in none does it say that decriminalizing would be bad?
Well then, okay, so if we're agreeing that none is a credible author, which I think we agree on, the second card in the 1NC, the third card in the 1NC, and the fourth card in the 1NC all say that investing in the law is bad. That is that is the point of competition. Okay.
So the point of competition is just affecting the law.
That's that, and also exceptionalizing the drug war. You're treating this as sort of a plan-focused debate about decriminalizing psychoactive substances, good, bad, when the entire affirmative is saying that the war on drugs is an exceptional phenomenon that reintroduces surplus criminality because it leads to a war on crime, a war on terror, etc., and a war on homelessness.
Okay, so I'm reading this line in your evidence, in our evidence that you recut about how the law cannot be viewed as a positive change, and then the line right after says that although the introduction of law into indigenous communities, it did bring order. So
and then the lines after that will say that it's bad. What?
Okay.
Like the entire thing, the title of Nunn's article from 97 or whatever is like Eurocentric law is bad. Like,
Well, then 5 years later, they advocated decriminalization. So
no, they're not. We cut the conclusion of the article that says that it's not sufficient.
The one in our sent. The order is K in the case.
It's just finishing up 2 NC things and then the permutation. In that
Yeah.
case.
The card I'm also going to read at the top was already sent out. The first piece of evidence. Everyone get the 1 in R cards. All right. Everyone good for me to go? All right. Okay. Reform debate. Crude examples of state reform. First, doesn't remedy surplus criminality. Repealing a doctrine, drug policy, mandatory minimums, or creating treatments or decreasing prison rates isn't enough to reshape American culture. Second, hurts Black autonomy. Using local laws just discredits Black institutions and Black nationals. Alternatives for care. Third, federal reform is still difficult. Biden was a staunch advocate for the war on drugs, especially true for the F-1C non-O2 African American defense of community with those race drug using criminals, associated with African American criminals, considered nowhere to where I was appearing in meeting and enjoy. Come to move into criminalize the private treatment and group the perms brain drain. Nunn says investing in policy solution mutes Black nationalism since it evacuates Black communities as talented leaders. Double bind either except for when I see justification makes them a moving target which will vote for Black clash or there's 9 links. First is the move to innocence link. Even if the plan is radical and egalitarian, it's the goal to end the drug war. That moves us to sanitize the slave state. That's one see none who's comparative. The law cannot address racism since it only processes bits and pieces of the problems in abstraction instead of one culture. Engaging the law for progressive reform like equal protection just provides protective service for white cultural hegemony that secures surplus criminality and perpetuates white supremacy. That's a D-roll and turns the whole app. Second, cracker democracy. Using legal structures like drug courts and Congress provides Western democratic institutional legitimacy that ruins credibility of hominous Black nationalist institutions that aren't seen as fit to rule or self-determine their own future. That's especially true given the Office of Harm Reduction and actions explicitly invested in external progressive institutions. Criminal justice reform is a project of integration, not the progressive mainstream that ensures Black dependence on generous white nonprofit experts. The impact is anti-Black paternalism, where Black people are seen as no problems to be solved, not an employee capable to give and govern themselves and create the solution to their own problem. The trade-off with the Black-led anti-violence and wealth and creation initiative is crucial to remedy oppression. That's love to 1. Third, arms reduction link. There's a crisis of legitimacy in criminal justice now since the trust of people is the all-time high due to police brutality, militarization that is AF psyop that pacifies dissident and improves the ratio between police and communities where you have social support instead. It's how the AF eludes itself into thinking it stops European conquest and international drug wars by only changing domestic dynamics. That justifies conflating narco traffickers with terrorists as grounds to intervene as Bolivia and Venezuela. And there's no shot the CIA stops fucking with Los Post plan. They don't end but sanitize the war on drugs domestically. Doug and Line 17 responding. Given away to the only process in resale lands and those legal form lands, even if don't come in as they don't problems or law enforcement really result in government that we need those arms transfer police and police and pacification and use of force company by how even person and country to police and service program and the community of the demonstration for to promote even this and making it and on the completely performs that important the war police violence and the repression of all those and not seeing if they want to start and fourth chronological reunification link deploying the discoursive regime of mass incarceration and want to see examine me through the refies the assumption that prison is narrowly related to the volume of crime and punishment rather than the racial economies of divestment, atrocity, and land use. Seeds criminal justice to the right. Brown, step 17. We should pay attention to the scenes of the massacre, because the criminal course of the date of his and autonomy is about to send to the regular with it on even the parties of the coming to the target as criminal justice and restoration of arms and resistance evidence of becoming strategies of justice. And fifth, democracy and black link. The permitting the war on drugs serves as an advertisement for massive success and vampirically sapping energy from insurgents by depending on moral persuasion of the slave state. Zero's grassroots movement by creating efforts in the state of policy, democracy, black people, and the research and legal action and legal organization of the Markland matter becoming standard as a police and reforms that even the negation of those at times that table energy would false or innocent the alarmist and a saying as always operates to address the black movements and no misery them free minister to the organization and service resources and who depends upon free audience and it was about the resident in the operations of all service that visiting the city the question is listed and abolish and come in all the democracy black rise of policing or freedom regimes. And 6, police shift link. The plan only cuts off one head of many head hydra. Even if the plan stops the psychoactive drug arrest and of sentencing, the police will not put renewed efforts to arrest them for other petty offenses, which zero solves. The only also the holistic challenge to anti-blackness is sufficient. 12 out of 12. They're talking about one piece concept of marijuana, even with marijuana would be different offense. And then follows the whole incarceration in place and police about efforts of even the plot of guns as a dangerous man. 7th, Hispanic is a regain era creation that racially flattens an entire dysphoria of black.
Scroll to the bottom of the doc, Seb.
Yep, got you.
The case.
Case. Group case overview. K. Massively turns incarceration and harm reduction impacts. We also turn stigma. The affirmative policy changes the trees of the problem in bits and pieces, which is sufficient. That's one I see none. Extend harm reduction as a frame entrenches discrimination, focusing solely on harm as an axis from the drug use that must be minimized, requires pathologizing pleasure and misdiagnosing the impacts for drug use that's connected to social excuse. And YAF is a band-aid that neutralizes housing, health, education, and criminal discrimination. Turns case harm reduction displaces carcerality through more integrated social management of deviancy. Miller 1. Adjunct to the court believe in this person doesn't move to risk management or these are person population risk management even hard even though for example it's while it's you and the natural rise of the magic of police rarity even though it's coming to do abstinence are reducing even harm to the failed to discourse. Group or cut the Miller 1 card at consider discourse. Akash, was this? Did you put the was?
I realized
Yeah.
that I didn't. I'm
Yeah,
sending it
you
out
can
now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Discourse ends at any paragraph, so I'm just gonna send that.
And the I didn't read Cruz 18.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
And I
Lynn
think,
14.
yeah,
And
we have
Oliver 16.
8 minutes, 10 seconds, I think. So whenever you send it out, we'll start prep.
I already sent it out, but yeah.
Okay, Akil, let me know when you get it. Is it in the body?
No.
Okay. Is it the like? Okay, I think I got it. A10. All right, we stopped prep at 3:30. We can say 30.
Can you, Rom, can you send the recuts?
Yeah. Do you have like a file for them, or should I just? Okay. Okay, give me a sec. Okay. I have to like open the document. Sorry. First, let me just put it in the chat. 3:30. Akio, could you just send it because you have that open? So.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. It'll be faster. Or actually, I can do it. I can still do it if you want.
I got it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, it should be sent. The order is just case and then K. Okay, let me know when everyone's got it. It's just in the body because it's just 2 cards.
Are those 2 cards just the recuts you were referring to?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Okay, North Broward, both of you good? All right, sounds good.
The office material concrete and productive policy that ends the war on drugs. 3 impacts. 1 is incarceration. The F immediately exonerates 2 million people over jail, which was dropped in the last speech. 2 is harms reduction, black indigenous, and a quick of efforts are being cracked down now, which makes the F a necessary survival strategy, which is independent, also dropped in the last speech. 3 is destigmatization. Drug law stigmatizes those seeking help, creates a generational cycles of deviancy, which means that the shift to public health at the very least normalizes that discourse in the debate space and can proliferate in the outside of it as well, which none other the critique cards account for. They do not turn mass incarceration. They've not outlined a way. They've not outlined a warrant reason as to how anything else other than the law can remove incarceration. They did not turn stigma either because they consider the Duff evidence, which is that we normalize a shift in discourse in the debate space. They say harms reduction bad. 1, the Duff answer above applies. 2 is that the affirmative is an affirmative solvency advocate because the justification for the carceral control over harms reduction is the criminalization of drugs. That's what the Dowdy evidence was the affirmative removes. The critique 2AC1 framework with the fear and implementation of the affirmative with the competitive advocacy versus the all no floating pace, and they cannot kick the all because it's a defense of their research paradigm. No, you should filter the links to the consequences of the affirmative. We'll grant the perhaps links, but they need to let us talk about the consequences of the affirmative because it's the locus of our scholarship, which means the threshold for their arguments are super high. That there's 2 impacts. The first is clash, the and implications, the plenarily predictable. The ground affirmative teams have clashes and intrinsic good, which encourages argument refinement. 2 is advocacy. There's multiple reasons why decriminalization of drugs is good, which was all in the 2AC. 1 is the strong public voice of decriminalization is for the trans and the Steven evidence, which cites empirical examples in Connecticut, California, Michigan, and North Carolina, which means that the accountability via the law, reform, and advocacy via the law has been empirically successful in multiple states, which means all of their links is a very high threshold. 2 is the grassroots organizing, only learning the link of the state allows us to infiltrate it. 3 is breaking down stigma, which was functionally dropped in the last speech. They've cited cards from 1997 from the non-evidence, but every card at the 1AC other than that says the opposite is true, and then we can dismantle those tropes about drug users. 4 is that the students as critical thinkers solve scenario forecasting. That their overview, they said fungibility and the cost the defense of none. We have agreed to defend none's examination and conclusions of the O2 article, which says that which broadly advocate for how decriminalization would generally be a good idea because the war on drugs is very bad. Their counter-interpretation on framework was there's no definition of a model. There's no definition of a model or of whatever the 2SC extrapolation was, which means they say feeling regressive and links to her office. Their first piece of office, which is the semiotics argument. 1 weighing consequences is a defense of and our policy action is the defense of the semiotics and a reason why using why semiotics can be good. And where their reps links giving the reps links solves. Their next argument was with white cultural hegemony. There's no warrant as to why all clash is anti-black, which means that you should not be willing to give them this argument. Their final argument was like the Voss with weighing the reps the solves, which was over above. The 2AC2 was permutation to both. They've cited a Nunn article 5 years before he claims that decriminalization is the biggest tenet of white supremacy. The 1SC cross-sex versus black nationalist movements would be cracked down on by Eurocentric law, so the permutation makes black nationalism infinitely easier because they can create black harms reduction without going to jail. Their argument about an activist strain is we're link turning it because instead of using time and energy to avoid crackdown, they can use the time and energy to protect black harms reduction in black communities. Their elite argument is a misunderstanding of the affirmative, which focuses on empowering activists via the guest elite, and it's not severance, which is all the affirmative done. The 2AC3 is permutation to each. Everyone who wants to advocate for the change to Eurocentric law because their family and friends are in jail. They definitely can, but everyone in Black nationalistic movements who don't want to, don't have to, which resolves any the TOC. The office is not severance. It was also above a link to make the first. There's two filters for the link. The first is this recut, which says that the crime creates racism, so removing the crime solved. That's when I say not. The two were in red. Crime is a social phenomenon. The creates racism. Crime produces racism. Racism produces crime. The crime generates racism, hatred. The first thing focus on target. Well, that is not so the criminal justice system continues to be the most significant. Just for some today, the greatest predictor of criminal justice system is there for the weak link to society for racism. And Murray concludes that grassroots movements can succeed post-AF. That's what I see. Murray Nate's movements that can be a term of stigma, future mobilizing the motion. I see a direction from individuals. Framing issues, they spammed a bunch of link where the permutation solves them, and we get new the two contextualization. Their first link about move to innocence is a link to the nation, but the affirmative criticizes the state, so it does not matter. Their second link about democracy critiques a current democratic law, but we empower grassroots organization, which is a grassroots owned. As for the Dowdy evidence, the third is link was harms reduction. It's not unique. There's only a the affirmative removes the justification for it. As for the non-evidence, which the permutation solves. The fourth link was the crime reification, where impact turning it because recognizing that mass incarceration exists via the criminal law is necessary to actually dismantle it and take 2 million people out of jail. The first link was democracy in blackness, but the empirics disprove it. As for the Stephen evidence, the 2AC5 is the explanatory power argument. We have proven contingency is the best explanatory power. The non-evidence says that laws have been employed poorly, and that even if laws generally have been bad, there's no the two answer one of our reason as to why drug decriminalization laws are inherently bad and why dismantling the war on drugs is bad. A camera's guard recut does not get them anywhere. Other crimes exist, but the permutation solves them. The biggest one. The drug crimes, the 2AC, the 10th, the all fails. The camera's guard evidence makes it very clear that police are already cracking down on when millions are in jail and dozens of black communities on harm reduction. The facilities are already being targeted. They've not articulated a way to get people out of jail or a way for black nationalism to actually succeed without using the law. Their Murray recut does not get them anywhere because they've considered the Dowdy evidence off case, and their final argument was that it solves the No, it does not. They've not explained how anything other than incorporating criminal using Eurocentric law can take people out of jail. And there are two cards about how movements are occurring right now do not account for crackdowns via drug criminalization.
Seven, starting. K case. Bharat, you good? All right. If anybody's not good, feel free to stop me now. Okay. Cool. The 1A or the 2A do not get takebacks from authors they think are credible. The 1AC and 2AC Crosslinks made it clear that Canon is an authority on the drug war, race, and crime, saying otherwise now that they discovered he's a black nationalist that hates engagement with the law, is non-black fluidity, that refuses to take accountability for their scholarly choices, and its fungibility since they weaponize black scholars against their own words, which is an independent vetting issue. That means every time I make an argument that none agrees with, you should treat it as the fucking gospel truth. There are two arguments that 1AC author agrees with that frame your RFD. One, boom, bust, links. Zero, C affirmative. We are decisively ahead on our unique claim. Racism is a political economy mediated by surplus criminality. Drop that racism requires a surplus of black and brown folks to play the role of threat during crisis to vouchsafe America's policing and criminal justice systems and to stand ready during periods of calm to await future crises. Stand drop out black and brown folks are criminalized to shore public support for the CGS. The non-evidence agrees that individual focus on the drug war perpetuates surplus criminality. They have dropped the quote from the 1AC Kramer's guard evidence, which says that resolving the drug war grants, quote, citizen rights again, and then it explains European conquest and Euro supremacy, which is what we have impacted. Focusing on ending the drug war individually would unquestionably put black folks under suspicion for tree crime, welfare fraud, sexual violence, or they'll be marshaled as terrorists. They've conceded that causes worse on crime, the homeless, or terror. The affirmative cannot solve incarceration, stigma, or white supremacy, or the third and bad in the 1A overview since the drug war is just a specific instance of service criminality. This is one is not evidence that let's try it out for the alternative to reshape American culture. Two, alternative of black nationalism solves the affirmative African autonomy that addresses causes, not symptoms, restores the strength of black institutions like African schools and businesses, provides employment and economic opportunity for black people, and ensures the intergenerational transmission of African values, which is good. It solves the root cause of the drug war since it reshapes anti-black American culture that undergirds surplus criminality that justifies the drug war in the first place. It's sufficient for safe injection sites that their 1AC evidence says are hosted by activists now as per 1AC Crosslinks, and they've mishandled that. The alternative functions is opaque that solves 100% of the affirmative. Their stigma argument on framework means the discourse of the war on drugs is sufficient to remedy stigma. The alt discourse that case the law and the war on drugs as part of surplus criminality solves more than non-material surplus approaches in Afrocentric institutions. Framework for the debate. Two, top-level arguments. One, role of the judge is to value competing models of cultural hegemony. Case impacts are made if one link proves the F's political program that sustains 1AC justifications or anti-like. Two, semiotics. Internal link terms clash and advocacy skills. The 1AC non-evidence as the drug war and surplus criminality are sustained through historical choices. I'll reread the 2AC quotes. Quote, the centerpiece was the rhetorical strategy that demonized drug users. Quote, the rhetoric of war shapes strategies that combat the threat. And quote, Reagan's rhetoric tap into cultural attitudes about people of color and links to drug use. So 1AC non-evidence says the shifts in cultural hegemony are crucial to challenge semiotic articulations and mentioning racial crime, which is what their 1A recut actually says, which proves pragmatic focus on policy is insufficient and proves confronting cultural hegemony is a crucial for effective advocacy skills and clash. Clash argument is a product of white cultural hegemony. It's defense. It cannot be an intrinsic good because combinations ever evolving and there's no procedural plan focus rule for negative scenes. Infinite progression claim is in bad faith because there's 2 decades of debate and the affirmative gets first to last speech to pick the best events of CTR. Advocacy skills they have dropped that elites are bad. The higher you rise in legal hierarchies, the less effective you are at passing reform. Activists, lawyers, and judges are sanctioned by conservatives, which is absent political cloud necessary to help black folks or movements. That's 1NC. That's the 1NC non-evidence. Individual states examples of state reform do not remedy surplus criminality. Repealing draconian drug policy, mandatory minimums, or creating treatments or decreasing prison rates is not enough to reshape American culture in holistically and drop that hurts black autonomy. Using local laws just discredits black institutions and black nationals alternatives for care, which is going to be explained on permutation to both critical thinking. Our critical thinking is better. Yours discount semiotic articulation. The none O2 argument. None has not changed depending about black nationalism or the war on drugs. We have cut the bottom of the 1AC article that is just focusing on the war on drugs misses the point of surplus criminality. At the very worst, it's a presumption ballot because ending the war on drugs causes wars on crime, terror, homelessness, etc. The turn incarceration, harms reduction, and stigma. Reps K does not solve our offense because they sideline rhetorical choices to appeal to case ways. Permutation do both. This 100% going to be the tuner because Ram and Akil have been posturing about why decriminalization of psychoactive substances is mutually exclusive with the alternative black nationalism. There's 2 reasons. One, boom bust stuff above preserve conception and explanatory power of the drug war obscures and perpetuates wars on crime, terror, homelessness, etc. 2, the state is bad. 2 words for the 1A are mishandled. First, move to innocence. Even if the plan is radical and egalitarian in its goal to end the drug war, that moves you to set aside the slave state. This is 1AC non-evidence use comparative. The law cannot address racism since it processes bits and pieces of the problem in abstraction instead of in culture. Engaging the law for progressive reform like equal protection just provides protective services to white cultural hegemony that secures surplus criminality and perpetuates perpetuates white supremacy. That's a D rule and turns the affirmative as per the 1R. 2, cracker democracy, using legal structures like drug courts and Congress provides Western democratic institutions with legitimacy that ruins credibility of autonomous like and nationalist institutions that are not seen as fit to rule or self-determine their own future, which proves that it trades off, which proves that it's anti-life paternalism that trades off the energy necessary for black nationalists to love to. One evidence we just conceded: crime turns racism. This card just says that the criminal justice system broadly creates labels of crime. That proves they create wars on crime, terror, homelessness, etc. because they only resolve the drug war movement. Recon. It's normative. It's the quote before they're highlighting says quote by including and respecting the leadership of people with lived experience, which is not descriptive of status quo movements. Now the non-evidence says that decriminalization misses the point. All does not fails to 3 warrants. 1, it's more pragmatic. Non-evidence is comparative and says from a pragmatic perspective the law cannot be viewed as a positive force for change. 2, trial right for black nationalism. You've conceded historical examples of the American Revolution, which proves that black nationalism is pragmatic or preparative evidence, such as American Revolution, abortion clinics, businesses, etc. 3, drop their van feed evidence, proves you should discount questions of pragmatism. The alternative remix is national realities, which builds social ethics, hospitality of captivity. You should be realistic and debate the possible. The case page. We have turned all of these arguments because the boom bust link proves that the affirmative does not solve any other impacts and missed the point.
Rob, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just saying we have 3:30 starting now. All right. Let me just. Okay, the order is case K. All right. Anyone need that again? Okay, cool. Is anyone not ready? Great. This debate is empirical, not theoretical. Hedge your bets on a concrete solution that we know can get 2 million people out of jail, not a vague nationalist movement that would get cracked down upon by the state. Even if using the law is bad, talking about it in debate is good, which is an independent impact of resolving stigma in debate, which Twitter is not grappling with. We should not wait for Black nationalists to organize when we can immediately let 2 million people out of jail, which is an independent impact that Twitter is not explained. This debate that means that we have clearly proven that the affirmative resolves 3 concrete impacts. 1 is harm reduction, reducing mortality by 35%. Second is incarceration, less 2 million people out of jail, and third is stigma, which is a drug impact, something that we can resolve in the debate space, which means that you should prioritize it. Now, I'm going to respond to the boom busting on the case debate first. The permutation solves it. If we create a cultural hegemony around it, that means that we can also make sure that the Black people aren't prosecuted for other crimes, regardless if they consider that it is bad logic. Just because there are other crimes that they can be prosecuted under does not mean we should remove the biggest one. They can let 2 million people out of jail. Third is that they've mishandled the empirics debate. They assert that empirics should not matter, but they've conceded the fact that in states like Connecticut, Mississippi, Rhode Island, and Ohio, in racially diverse areas, we managed to reduce prison populations by 25%. If the boom bust was really actually true, then the empirical records just clearly go against it. Now, the link debate, we have recut their recuttings that all prove that the only way that we can dismantle the criminal justice system is by dismantling the system of criminality, which only the affirmative can solve. Look, we have made it very clear that throughout this debate, we do not disagree with the premise of the none, but rather our argument is that they can coexist, which takes out the Twin Arms argument about how it's a voting issue, because we have made it very clear that rather the permutation that can resolve the residual offense, especially because none does not. The none might say that using the law in some instances might not be productive, but because we have proven contingency in the context of the affirmative, it is productive because we have empirical examples of it working. You should hedge your bets on a strategy that is empirically proven to succeed. Now, framework, the fact that they are unable to explain how they will achieve change beyond gesturing about it, beyond gesturing about nationalism, proves is a representation of their bad educational paradigm. This debate is about strategies for resistance, and only we as the affirmative team have proposed one that can actually work as per the case debate. They say semiotics internal to clash. Yes, words we use are important, but a defense of our semiotics is the consequences of our policy. The Duff and Murray evidence is that a discourse is intertwined with policy, which means that the way we can create policy change is by changing the discourse in debate. The policy can change discourse, but not the other way around. They say the clash is bad faith because the advocates of first and last speech, but all other offenses, but all of this is solved by us just weighing the affirmative. Besides, they get the block, which means that the balance is any affidavit fairness. They say the activists are sanctioned by conservative, but this proves why the permutation was solved. Now, the framing issue for all of the links is that the plan does not solve the permutation that does. The problem in the Twin R is that they have responded to perm do both, but they have not responded to specific one-year contextualization under permutation do each. Our argument is that we can disarm the state to make sure the alternative succeeds. Make them make them explain this beyond just gesturing about Black nationalism. There's only a risk this is the best option. There are 2 benefits that were conceded to the 1 year. One is crackdown. Second, this bringing 2 million people out of jail. That massively outweighs the link debate. I'll do it here first. They say the state is bad because it secures surplus criminality, but the way we break down the surplus criminality is by showing the state whose boss is by ensuring these Black nationalist movements are successful. And the way we do that is by stopping the police from cracking down upon them. We've ensured empirical examples of the state cracking down on movements, which means there's only a risk that our model can solve theirs. Now, advocacy, that there are 4 reasons why flushing out decriminalization in debate is good. One is the public voice. That allows an empirical success in activist strategies. Second is grassroots movements. The Heller evidence and the Murray evidence says that movements are critical to succeed. We've cited literal quotes from activists who said they want our affirmative. Third is that it dismantles stigma in debate. And finally, is it uses students as critical thinkers to break down problems in the debate space. They say that they'll be convicted of other crimes responding to on the case made. They say uniqueness because it requires black folks to play the role of the threat. No, we don't, because of permutation. This all since we don't frame black folks as the threat, but rather a vehicle for the solution. Now the link debate. There's three framing issues. Even if the engagement with the law is generally bad, specifically with war on drugs, it is good. One is empiric. States mandatory minimum is all decreased enforcement of these criminal laws. Second is the non-evidence. We use the law to enable these cultural shifts. The criminal quote, the criminal justice system is a weak link. Quote, crimes create racism. The only way we can break these down is by removing them from the top down. The third is a negative state action. This obvious other link about the state being bad. We use the law to break down the law. The theory of surplus criminality does not apply to the affirmative. It is enabled by the laws which we disarm. We are disarming the state. Look, if you cannot explain to me in RFD how affirming black nationalism, like by increasing employment, increasing business, and reshaping anti-black culture is mutually exclusive with getting 2 million people out of jail, you can't vote negative on this argument. They say it's a pick out of the laws, but if you can't solve the laws, and you can't solve the affirmative, since it's all about bringing people out of prison. They say empirics don't matter. Yes, they do matter because they show empirical success for a plan working, but they cannot show the same, which means that this is the tiebreaker in this debate. They say mufti innocent, but we are critiquing that because we've proven that empirically the state may be bad, but contingency, we can make the state effective in certain instances. The fact that they conceded most of the case debate proves that. Good debate.
Good debate.
Good debate. Barth, I'm gonna send you a card doc.
I went to go get water. What did you say?
I'm just saying I'm compiling a card doc for you right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you want an F card doc too? All right, I'll take that as a no.
Neg car doc is sent. Yeah.
All right, I'm good. Everybody's still here.
I'm here as well. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, I'll try to keep this quick because I know you both are. Well, yeah, both of y'all are breaking, so you got better shit to do. All right. So before I give my decision, I want to start off by saying congrats to both of you on an amazing tournament and a good season. Reaching the TOC is really big, let alone breaking at the TOC. And I think both teams are, so that's amazing. It's a major accomplishment. You should be very proud of yourself. Okay, so this was one of the toughest debates I've had to evaluate all year, but that's a good thing, and it's expected being both your teams are like undefeated and at the TOC. I did conclude negative. So like most Clash of Civs debates, I began my consideration on the framework flow. Here I think that the negative wins that their interpretation and is good, and a psychological enslavement turn that forces Black people to adhere to white adoption as a debate is bad. That total with the argument about like legal education causing anti-Blackness because it makes Black liberation harder, that leads to violence is convincing to me. I do think I could be easily convinced to let you weigh the AF, but the 2AR there was a little bit too light. All I have from you is like a one-sentence explanation of Clash, an argument why discourse is intertwined with policy, but when extending that argument, there's no answer to this 2NC/2NR pick argument that if discourse of criticizing the war on drugs has an effect, then picking out of the plan that K's through Afrocentric institutions was solved. I also think that there's this negative argument that the higher you rise in legal schemas, the harder it makes it for you to do anything that those skills go nowhere, although that wasn't too much of a 2AR push. Second, I look at the AF to give you the benefit of the doubt on the whole 2 million people out of jail explanation. Here I think that the negative wins that it is your focus and representation of the war on drugs that's harmful to Black people because it would cause more crackdown on Black people in other forms, i.e. things like homelessness. Third, I look at the permutation because that was clearly a large part of the 2AR strategy. The problem for me here is that you do a great job extending your arguments, but there's almost no answer to the negatives cracker democracy argument that even if we do permutate each and people decide whatever is good for them or permutate both, the fact that there is a legal option is bad because it forefronts a white superiority complex where Black people are seen as not able to care for themselves or make decisions for themselves / not fit to rule. E.g., there needs to be a babysitter or someone to watch them. That causes harms and hurts Black autonomy, which the all can resolve, but not the app. Second, the 2AR answer to the innocence argument is, quote, we can make the state effective. Huh? How? I don't get it. The argument is that allowing decriminalization now from legal institutions allows them to cleanse themselves of decades and centuries of violence against Black people, and that sanitization is bad. Now, in a world where they've won a large Black autonomy dissad, I forgot the name. What was it? Cracker Democracy dissad, the argument all about like Black autonomy to the AF, that kind of helps them on the alternative front because Black nationalism would be a first step to giving Black people the autonomy and choice to build their community. They have a defense of Afrocentric communities being good, which I don't think that the AF grapples too well with. A winning 2AR in my eyes encompasses the following. One, a larger sit-on framework, a much larger sit-on framework. Second, followed by an answer to the Black autonomy, the whole portion of that debate. And then finally ending with the permutation and answering the links. I also think that answering the innocence portion of the debate a little bit earlier would be beneficial because the 2AR did get to it a little bit too late. Additionally, I do agree with the negative that none concludes that legal tactics are bad. Most of his work seems to criticize legal change. Although the last time I read like an article written by none was a long time ago, so maybe I'm wrong about this. But I guess my decision is less on that, more of just like the technical levels of stuff that happened in this debate. This like last thing, this like top of the 2NR theory argument that North Broward tries to go for. I didn't really wait too much. Akash, if that's a move, you need a lot more on it. Let's see. I'm looking at my flow. Yeah, no, that's what I had. All this said, I did enjoy the opportunity to judge y'all and wish you the best of luck. Now, the only thing I'll say is that I have a team in a break ground right now, and so I'm going to get to them so we can do a prep and we can pick up dinner. So I asked that you email me with questions just because, I mean, it's right before out rounds, and I really want to help them out. But I promise that if you email me, I will get you a response by this evening at the latest in prep for tomorrow. But yeah, I mean, I really hope y'all do well. I've judged Bellarmine a crap ton this year, which is shocking because I wouldn't expect it, but they picked up my ballot a lot, so I won't even lie. I had a lot of fun judging y'all because you're very talented debaters.
Thank you for judging and taking the time to explain your RFD.
Absolutely.
We'll definitely email if we have questions. And good luck to North Broward.
Yep, good luck. Thank you.
Thanks for judging.
Thank you for judging.